Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, I want to tell you 8 terrifying stories of road trips through Appalachia in October, where winding mountain roads don't just take you places, they bring you closer to things you were never meant to see. Out there, the fog doesn't lift, even after sunrise, and folks still whisper, if you ever stop between those twin ridgelines, don't look too long into your rearview mirror. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and let me know where you're listening from, because one of these stories might have started not far from where you are. Thank you for being here. Now then, let's begin. I'd been running overnight freight into Tennessee for about 8 years, but by 31, I'd narrowed my route to what worked best. Ash Fork Pass was always my favorite leg of the drive. 2-lane blacktop, no cell reception, no way stations. Just me, the hum of the rig, and the kind of silence you only get when the trees are taller than the road signs. My name's Eli. By the way, grew up in Boone. Still rent a small place just outside Johnson City. No wife, no kids, unless you count the truck. I never minded the quiet, especially up in the hills around October, when the air feels sharper and the fog's got weight to it. That night started like the others. I left the yard just before 10, hauling insulated produce trailers eastbound. Cool air, good tires, half a thermos of coffee. I reached the pull-off near Ash Fork just after midnight and parked to stretch and nap. What woke me was a single sharp pop, not thunder. It had that thick, pressurized crack you get from a blown tire, the kind that shakes the frame and sticks in your teeth. I sat up fast, half dazed, heart jumping before I even got both boots on. The road was empty. I stepped out with my flashlight. It checked every tire. Walked the length of the trailer twice. Nothing looked wrong. No blowout, no debris. Just fog and leaves shifting across the asphalt like low smoke. I told myself maybe it came from down the slope. Hunters. Maybe. I'd seen signs for bear tracking up there once, years back. Still, I couldn't shake the way it had felt. Not hurt, but felt, like it cracked right against the door. I got back in, tried to laugh it off, drank what was left of the coffee and pulled out slow, watching the mirrors. I kept thinking maybe I just dreamt it, that my body was playing tricks after too many nights alone in the cab. But a few miles later, something else caught my eye. Lights? Not mine. Not anyone's eye could explain. A pair of headlights were off to the right, maybe 30 yards into the woods. No trail, no path, just sitting behind the trees, pointed toward the road. They weren't moving, not swinging with motion like a truck backing in, just still, a pale cone of light bleeding through the fog, barely touching the undergrowth. I slowed, rolled past, windows cracked. Nothing but crickets and that faint electrical hum of the engine idling. By the time I reached the next turnout, I was itching to check the rear. Something was off. I stopped again, walked back, and there it was. The latch on the rear trailer door was half open, not swinging wide, just unhooked. I stared at it a long time. I closed those doors myself. Always. It's part of the final check before rolling out. And even if I hadn't, the first bump out of the yard would have swung it wide open. I shut it. Tight. Bolted it this time with the bar. My hands shook more than I wanted to admit. Back in the cab, I flicked on the CB out of habit. Just static. Then something in the static shifted. Not a voice exactly. Not at first. More like someone breathing just off frequency. Then, clear as day, "Hey, Eli, this is one in compractness." I cut the volume, stared at the box, like it might say more. But it didn't. Just hissed and popped, like nothing had happened. I sat there, waiting, ears straining like a fool. I didn't think I'd heard it right. But my name's not common, not where I run. I hadn't keyed the mic. Hadn't said a word. No trucks in range. No chatter. Just that whisper. Cold crept into my fingers. Still, I told myself it had to be interference. Maybe a cross frequency. Some garbled dispatch bouncing off the ridge. I kept the CB off after that. Focused on the road. Kept rolling. But near 3 a.m., I stopped again. I don't know why. Something told me to check. The same turnout as before. I walked around. Flashlight pointed low. The latch held this time. Locked. Then I heard it. A whisper again. Not from the CB. From under the rig. A man's voice. Low and close. Eli. It. AC more. I froze. Light shaking in my grip. I knelt slow. Leaned just far enough to angle the beam beneath the trailer. Nothing. Just gravel and the low curve of the undercarriage. But there were tracks. Fresh ones. Muddy boot prints that hadn't been there 10 minutes ago. They trailed off into the ditch, where the dark swallowed them. I didn't shout. Didn't ask who was there. I backed up fast and slammed both doors with my whole weight. Through every lock and bar I had. When I climbed back into the cab, my hands stuck to the wheel with sweat. I floored it. Every muscle tight. Eyes jumping between the mirrors and the road. The CB stayed off. I didn't even want the engine noise anymore. Just the road, and the hum, and the miles between me and that whisper. The fog got thicker the higher I went. Ash Fork Pass wasn't high elevation, but it had that kind of dense Appalachian mist that settles in hard after midnight. The whiteout came fast. Tree limbs leaned over the road, gnarled and wet, scratching against the glass when I brushed too close. Then something moved. It crosses just ahead of the headlights. A shape, upright but hunched, half the height of the rig. Fast. I swerve. The whole cab lurches, tires skimming the edge. Branches rake the side of the trailer. A scream of metal and bark. The coffee thermos topples. I fight the wheel back, heart slamming like I took a hit. But the road holds. I don't stop. Not for another hour. I reach a Shell station just off the main route and pull in. Yellow lights overhead. No one else on the lot. I kill the engine and sit there with both hands on my knees. Shaking. Inside, I washed up. Tried to look normal. Told myself it was just some drifter messing around back on the pull-off. Maybe someone squatting in the woods, looking to hitch a ride, or worse. The cashier was an older guy. Late shift. Looked like he'd been there since the 70s. He watched me wipe my face with one of the brown paper towels and said, real quiet, "You come down from Ash Fork." One nodded and all. I nodded, not saying much. He said, "Nobody stops up there. Not since the 93 thing." To Arkin, I asked what happened in 93. He just shook his head. Said, "They never found the rig. Only his boots. Down in the ditch." Yes, that was not round. I left without buying anything. Got back in the cab. Double-checked the locks. The mirrors. Everything. I told myself again it was just a story. Just some backwoods rumor to keep drivers alert. But when I climbed into the sleeper, I saw it. A print on the side window. Inside. Wet. Streaked with smudges. Not from rain. Not from animal paws. It looked like a hand. Big. Spread fingers. Too wide for mine. Too high for anything that could have climbed up. And the window had been shut. I drove through the night. Skipped my last stop. Kept going until the sun came up and the mist broke like it was never there. I put in for daytime-only routes 2 weeks later. Told dispatch I had trouble with visibility at night, which was partly true. They didn't ask too many questions. But I never drove past Ash Fork Pass again. Every fall. Though, when the brakes hiss on a downhill grade, I still swear I hear it. Soft. Close. A whisper just outside the cab window. Always the same voice. Saying my name. The road curled upward like a ribbon pulled into the trees. and the fog was already thick enough that the headlights looked useless. Kayla had her feet up on the dash, humming along to a playlist she'd made for the drive. Leaves kept brushing the windshield, wet and golden, barely clinging before sliding off into the dark. We were somewhere between Elkins and a town I couldn't pronounce, aiming for a fall festival she'd found online. I'm Daniel, by the way, 28, work in IT. Don't get out of the city as much as I should. Kayla's the one who likes the woods. I was just along for the weekend, thinking cider and pumpkin stands sounded like a fair trade for not checking emails. We had been driving through the mountains for maybe an hour when the GPS led us onto a stretch called Fog Hollow Pass. That name didn't mean much at first. There were no signs, no mile markers, nothing but 2 lanes and forest. But something about the name stuck in my head like a pebble in a boot. At first, it felt peaceful, like the kind of quiet people write about in journals. The road was narrow, but the mist made it seem even longer, like it stretched out ahead of us farther than it should have. Every turn looked like the one before it. After a while, Kayla pointed out that we hadn't seen another car in almost 40 minutes. I checked the mirror and realized she was right. Nothing behind us. Nothing ahead. We pulled off near a gravel shoulder so she could stretch and take photos. She was into that. Fog across tree branches. Soft light in strange places. She stepped out without saying anything, just slid from the seat and walked into the mist with her phone. I stayed behind and checked the GPS again, but it had frozen, just spinning. When she came back, she looked confused. She stood outside the door for a second, then tried to open it again. I unlocked it from the inside, and when she climbed back in, she gave me a weird look. Why'd you lock the door? They're not you getting to a life. I didn't. Thanks for watching. She didn't say anything else, but I could feel her watching me. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe it auto-locked when I shifted into park, though that had never happened before. Still, I didn't push it. We kept going. The fog wasn't just thick now. It was moving, sliding across the road in slow curtains. It felt heavier somehow, like it had weight. That's when I started getting the feeling. You know the one. Like someone's watching you, but not from one place. From everywhere. I looked out the window and into the tree line. I don't even know what I was expecting. There was nothing, just the blur of trunks and mist. But I couldn't shake the feeling that if I stared long enough, I'd see something shift. Then the smear appeared. It was sudden. A wet streak across the windshield, right in front of me, like someone had dragged a handful of mud across the glass. I didn't hear anything. No thump, no footstep, just that mark, wide and long and fresh. Kayla leaned forward. Was that there before? Is they do day dawn? I didn't answer. I hit the wipers. One sweep. The glass came clean, but only once. The second swipe was dry, like the blades were gliding over a mirror. I pulled over again, heart ticking faster than I liked. Stepped out, walked around the front. There was nothing there. No footprints, no handprints, just the faint stink of wet soil in the air. When I came back around, Kayla was staring at the trees. Did you hear laughing? Anythings when all ways to by find me. I stopped. What? Bison. They climbed us. She didn't turn. Just now. From the woods? Was the We sat there. Quiet. Windows half down. Fog curling in the gaps. That was when I heard it too. A laugh. Not loud. Low. Raspy. Not coming from in front of us. Not behind. It came from below. From the tree line. Or maybe even under the road. Like the ground itself was trying to exhale. Then it stopped. Just like that. We didn't talk after that. Just sat still. Breathing. I reached for the ignition. Turned the key. Nothing happened. The engine didn't even try. Just a series of clicks. Then a low hum, like the battery was alive but refusing to cooperate. I tried again. The dash lights flickered once, then went dark. Kayla grabbed my arm. "Start it," she said, voice rising. "Daniel, just start it." "He's I'm trying." Isa cries. She fumbled with her seatbelt and reached for the door handle. "Wait," I said, grabbing her wrist. "Where are you going?" "The Selby. We need to move. We need to run. I am not staying in this car." "Is our lave?" I wanted to argue, but something outside moved. A shift in the mist. I heard the crunch of gravel, deliberate and slow. Something was walking around the vehicle. We crawled into the back seat and slipped out the opposite door, keeping low. The cold hit us like a wall, damp and heavy. I pulled Kayla with me into the ditch beside the road. Wet grass soaked through my jeans in seconds. We didn't speak, just listened. The steps circled the car once. Slow, measured, like whoever it was knew we were close. The weight of each step pressed into the gravel, not stomping but dragging, almost careful. Then it stopped. Everything stopped. The air turned dead quiet. Even the breeze through the trees felt like it was holding back. No sound, no movement, just a crushing stillness that made my ears ring. We stayed in the ditch until our knees ached and the cold started to bite. Then, when we couldn't take it anymore, we stood up and peeked back toward the car. Lights were steady. Nothing moved. Kayla looked at me. "You think it's gone?" "I looking this is arrestin'. I don't know. Is this formant?" We waited another minute, then crept back to the car. Every part of me expected the handle to stick or the lights to flicker again. But they didn't. The door opened. The dash lit up like normal. I turned the key. This time, the engine roared to life like it had never failed. We didn't talk, didn't put music on, just kept driving. The fog began to thin after a while. Houses started to appear in the distance. Then lights. Town lights. Real ones. I felt my chest loosen for the first time in over an hour. That was when I looked up at the rearview mirror. A handprint was sliding down the inside of the back window. Palm wide, wet, streaking slowly, as if it had just been placed there. Fingers dragging. From the inside, I slammed the brakes. Kayla screamed. We pulled over on a stretch of open road. No fog. Nothing but us and the cold. I ran to the trunk. Swung it open. Empty. Completely empty. Except for one thing. A single wet footprint. Right in the middle of the lining. Small. Bare. Like someone had stood there. Quiet. While we drove. We didn't speak again until we reached the hotel. Since that night, I do not drive mountain roads after dark. Especially not when the fog rolls in. Because sometimes I swear I still hear it. That same laugh. Too low to be human. Tucked behind the hum of the engine. And it always sounds like it is waiting. Before we step into the next story, if you're still here, still listening, with the lights low, maybe drop a comment. Just tell me where you're listening from. It helps more than you know. All right, let's keep going. The last stretch of highway was always the quietest. Flat road. No radio towers. Just the white lines blinking under the headlights like a metronome. It was after 10, maybe closer to 11. October air coming in through the vent had that crisp, dry smell of leaves. I had just left the final rest stop before the state line. There was no one behind the counter. But the lights were on and a TV was buzzing somewhere in the back. I used the bathroom, grabbed a Coke from the machine, and came out expecting the same emptiness I had walked into. For a second, it was. Then, I saw it. A photo, about the size of a playing card, laminated and warped at the edges, sitting dead center on my windshield. I thought it was some kind of flyer at first. But when I picked it up, I felt the plasticky edge and saw the image. It was a girl, standing in front of a car. Same model, Same color, same make, parked the exact same way I had parked mine. I turned it over. Nothing on the back. No words. Just the picture. My name is Morgan. By the way, 34. I was driving home after visiting my mom in Virginia, trying to make it back across state before midnight. The trip had been fine. Long, but familiar. This was the first time I had ever seen something on my car that I didn't put there. I got inside fast, locked the doors, and sat for a minute before pulling back onto the road. My first thought was that someone had mistaken my car for theirs and left something behind. But then why not knock? Why not wait? 30 miles later, I had almost forgotten it. The road curved around a long stretch of hillside and flattened out near a wooded patch. That was when the headlights appeared behind me. Bright, close, too close. At first, I thought maybe I had cut someone off. I slowed slightly, let them see my signals. But when I changed lanes, they stayed behind me. When I sped up, so did they. Then, just before the Lanesboro exit, they disappeared. No turn, no headlights pulling off. Just gone when I rounded the bend. I told myself they must have pulled off into a turnout I missed. Or maybe they killed their lights and took an unmarked exit. Either way, I didn't see them again right away. At the next gas station, I pulled off. I needed to check the map again, make sure I had the right route around construction. The place was half lit, but the pumps worked and the lot was empty. I left the car running and stepped out with my phone. When I came back, the trunk was open. Wide. I stopped mid-step, looked around. Nothing moved. No one in sight. I crept toward the back, heart thudding harder now. Looked inside. Nothing was missing. Bag still there. Spare tire. Emergency kit. Everything exactly where I left it. Except for one thing. Another photo. This one was clearer. It was me, standing next to the gas pump, wearing the same jacket, holding the same phone. It had been taken maybe a minute before I noticed the trunk. I backed away fast, slammed it shut, locked every door twice, and climbed into the driver's seat, breathing hard. I gripped the wheel and stared straight ahead. Then came the sound. Knuckles, rapping lightly on the passenger side window. I turned my head. There was no one there. I did not wait to see if it happened again. I locked the windows, threw the car in gear, and hit the gas. Gravel scattered behind me as the tires caught the pavement. The gas station lights blurred in the mirror until they vanished completely. I stayed on the main road at first, trying to keep steady, but my hands would not stop shaking. I kept checking the mirrors, convinced I would see headlights again. For a few miles, I saw nothing. Then, at the edge of a curve, light flared in the distance. It grew fast. Too fast. A dark vehicle, maybe a truck, came up from behind. No license plate visible. No headlights at first. Just the faint glow of running lights. Then, when I tried to accelerate, it switched the beams on full. The light filled my mirrors and burned through the glass. I could not see anything but white. I drifted toward the shoulder, hoping they would pass. They did not. They matched my every move. I turned right. They turned right. Left. Same thing. Whoever it was, they wanted me to know they were not leaving. I took the next exit without even thinking. A small green sign read, Lanesboro. The road narrowed. The trees thickened, and the air seemed to close in. The truck stayed behind, lights flashing on and off like a warning. The road ahead split into two narrow lanes, both lined with trees. I turned down one at random, hoping to lose them. It was rough and uneven, probably used for logging. No signs, no houses, nothing, just dirt and moonlight. But the lights followed. When the road finally bent, I cut hard into a side path and killed the headlights. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it echo in the empty car. For a moment, the darkness felt like safety. Then I saw their headlights turn the same corner. I started the engine again. It coughed once, then caught. I pressed the pedal to the floor. The tires skidded over loose gravel as the trees blurred on both sides. The dirt road narrowed to a single lane, ending somewhere deep in the woods. Dead end. The sign came too late. The truck's engine roared behind me, closing the distance. I yanked the wheel, turned the car around fast. Gravel flying. The headlights came closer, flooding the windshield. My pulse hammered in my ears. I could see the shape of the vehicle now, bigger than mine, closing fast. It lunges forward, grille flashing, coming straight for me. Everything moves at once. I slam the gear into reverse. Floor it. The engine screaming. The air smells like burning rubber and wet earth. The truck charges, its lights blinding as it skids to block the path. I jerk the wheel, swerve sideways, and the side mirror snaps against a branch. The two vehicles meet in silence that breaks too late. I twist the wheel again. Hard left. Tires scraping bark. The world tilts. Then somehow, the car finds space. A gap between two thick trees. Just wide enough to slip through. Metal scrapes bark as I shoot through, branches raking the roof. The truck tries to follow but clips a stump. I hear the crunch of impact. Glass breaking, then nothing but the sound of my own engine. I keep driving, headlights bouncing off the trail until I find the highway again. I did not stop until dawn. When I finally pulled into a rest area, I got out, checked the trunk, checked the mirrors, checked everything twice. Then a third time, because my hands would not stop moving. The photos were gone. Every one of them. After that night, I never drove alone again after dark. I still think about the moment I saw the second photo in the trunk. How long they must have been there. Close enough to take it without me seeing. Sometimes, when I stop at a light, I still glance into the mirror. And when the car behind me turns its headlights off, even for a second, I can feel every part of that night come rushing back. The sound came just after the third bend in the road. A high, thin scrape, like metal dragged over stone, brushing the side of the truck. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the quiet like it came from somewhere deeper. I turned the music off and rolled the window down. Nothing. Just the rustle of dry leaves outside and the echo of my tires on old pavement. I figured it was loose gravel or a tree branch scraping the undercarriage. Maybe a nail or rebar sticking out from the rock wall. It made sense at the time. My name is Ellis, 41. I do wind inspections across 3 counties and was finishing up a 5-day survey up on Backbone Ridge. It was late October, and the light had started falling behind the trees by the time I packed up. Google had thrown me a shortcut, a narrow pass through an old mining district west of Barlow. I'd never heard of it, but it cut almost an hour off the trip, and I wanted to sleep in my own bed for once. The map showed it as a thin gray line between hills. I figured it was paved, or at least graded. The sun dropped low as I turned onto the pass. At first, it was just tight curves and steep shoulders. Old warning signs leaned in from both sides. No street lamps. No guardrails. Then the road changed. It narrowed. The trees pulled in tighter, and the air started to feel cold in a way that wasn't just temperature. I passed what looked like the entrance to an old tunnel. Braced rock, rusted beams. The kind of thing you don't think much about unless you've worked underground. I had, years ago, I knew what unsupported stone sounded like when it shifted. I drove on. Then the lights flickered. Just once. A quick pulse. I figured it was a short or a bad fuse. The battery was new, but old roads can jostle things loose. I kept going, but I tapped the dash, half joking with the truck like it could hear me. A few minutes later, the lights cut out again. Not a pulse this time. A full blackout. Then they came back on. And for half a second, the rearview mirror caught something. A blur. A shape that moved across the road behind me. I hit the brakes, put the truck in park, sat still. Nothing moved. I got out with my flashlight, walked a slow circle. No footprints, no animals. The gravel was undisturbed, except for one thing. A long, dragging mark in the mud behind the truck. It wasn't deep, just a dark smear that started near the center of the road and disappeared into the shadow of the tunnel entrance. It looked like something had been pulled, not walked. I told myself it was runoff, water, or some tire track I didn't notice before. Still, I stepped back into the truck faster than I meant to. I stayed in gear after that, hands tight on the wheel, eyes scanning both sides of the tunnel as I eased deeper into the cut. The ceiling lowered, and the rock felt closer. I had almost made it through when everything shut down. The dash, the lights, even the engine. Silence filled the cab like fog. Then the lights started blinking again. Fast. Erratic. Left side. Then right. Then off. And then came the sound. A slow, deliberate scratching against the side of the truck. Not claws. Not branches. Fingernails. Dragging. Then a breath. Right outside the driver's window. Shallow. Strained. Like someone who had not spoken in a very long time. For a moment I could not move. The sound came again. Closer this time, dragging up the length of the door. My chest locked. I reached for the flashlight on the seat beside me and held it like a weapon, waiting for something to strike the glass. Nothing did, but the breathing stayed. Slow, thin. It rose and fell against the window as if someone was leaning there, face pressed to the glass. Then the air changed, damp and heavy, carrying the smell of rust and stone. I slammed the door open and ran. The cold hit me like a wall. I turned toward the mouth of the tunnel, light shaking in my hand, and saw the path collapse just 20 yards ahead. The road had given way. Chunks of rock and dirt filled the center like a wound. For a second, I froze between going forward and turning back. Then instinct took over. I jumped down to a narrow shelf of soil that ran along the side and slid halfway down the slope, landing in a pile of loose gravel. My flashlight flickered but stayed alive. I crouched there, heart pounding. The tunnel was quiet again. No breath, no scratching, just the faint trickle of water from somewhere in the rock. The truck sat in the distance, tilted slightly, still dark, except for a single hazard light that blinked once every few seconds. It felt like the world had stopped moving. My ears rang with it. I waited, counting each flash until the shaking in my hands began to ease. I told myself it was over. The air was cold enough that my breath fogged in front of me. I wanted to believe I was alone again. That was the mistake. When I looked back, the hazard light blinked twice and stopped. A moment later, the cabin light flicked on. I knew exactly where my keys were, inside my jacket pocket. I swallowed hard and stepped closer. Each footfall echoed inside the tunnel, bouncing off stone until I could not tell where it came from. My own breathing sounded wrong, too loud, like it belonged to someone else. I reached the truck door, leaned in, and looked through the window. Empty. No movement inside. No figures. Just my jacket draped across the seat and the soft yellow glow from the dome light. I stood there for a second, thinking maybe the wiring had shorted again. Then something cold brushed the back of my neck. I turned fast. Nothing. But the air behind me had shifted, like something had just moved through it. I felt a faint touch against the fabric of my coat. A light tug. Enough to make me stumble forward. I dropped the flashlight. I didn't look back. I ran. I cleared the tunnel mouth. Slid down the slope again, branches tearing at my arms. I could still hear the faint scrape of something following, softer now, matching the rhythm of my steps. I pushed harder, lungs burning, until I reached the service road 2 kilometers down. When I stopped, I could see the stars again. The sound had stopped. The world was quiet. My hands were covered in dirt and small cuts. But I was alive. 2 days later, they found the truck where I left it, half buried by another collapse. Inside the trunk was a folded strip of fabric, gray and worn thin. Someone said it looked like part of an old miner's uniform. Clean, dry, placed neatly in the center. I never went back to that site. Now I teach maintenance at a vocational school. I drive only during the day, and when I hear a scraping sound against metal, even faintly, my first instinct is still to turn off the road and listen, just to make sure it is not breathing. There was one rule we agreed on before heading out. If we saw an old sign with faded letters or something scratched over, we would not stop. No debate. Roads like that never led anywhere you wanted to be. My name is Ethan. I was 26 at the time, tagging along with 2 friends, Connor and Lena. The plan was to do a loop down through the Blue Ridge foothills, hitting some of the less traveled trails before cold weather set in. We had 2 tents, enough supplies for 3 days, and not a lot of structure beyond head south and find trees. This is we had. That afternoon, we were looking for a place to set up camp before dark when Lena spotted the sign. It was nailed crookedly to an old post. Wood, gone gray with age. The lettering was faded, almost swallowed by the grain. It said, "Shortcut to Hamlet H." Is it not a saying? She leaned toward the window and said, "That wasn't here yesterday, right?" Is it is of course ours. We had passed the same spot the day before, heading in the opposite direction. I would have remembered it. The lettering looked old, but there was something off about how it sat on the surface, like it had been added later, or covered up once and painted over. Connor looked back at the trail. Nope. Rule's clear. We keep moving. I see works. Lena rolled her eyes. Come on. It's probably just some old farm town. Could be cool. Just one photo. Things that woed. She had already pulled out her phone before either of us answered. The woods were starting to close in around us. The road felt narrower than it had an hour ago. Trees leaned in, darker now, and the light took on that dull copper tone that shows up right before dusk hits full. The sign pointed toward a side trail we had not noticed before, thin and overgrown. We turned anyway. That part's on me. I should have said no. The road thinned fast. Every time we rounded a bend, it felt like the woods pressed in harder. Dry branches snapped under the tires, and dust floated in the mirrors long after we passed. The silence started to feel thick. No wind, no bugs, no birdsong. Connor slowed. He shifted in his seat. Do you feel that? He said next. The car dipped slightly, like someone had leaned on the back bumper. I turned around. Nothing there. He pulled over, got out to check the tires. I stepped out too, mostly to get my feet on the ground. Everything around us felt still, too still. I stared back down the trail, trying to find the sign again. And that was when I saw it. The lettering was gone. Where it had said, "Shortcut to Hamlet H," it now said only one word. Turn. If you are deaf, overway. The wood hadn't changed. The paint looked aged, as if the word had always been there, like we had imagined the rest. Before I could say anything, Lena was already walking ahead, far up the trail, just before the next bend. Someone was standing near the edge of the brush. They wore a torn raincoat. No color to it. No face I could see. Just standing still. Then one hand rose. A wave. Slow and calm. Like someone calling you home. Lena started walking toward them. I called out, but she didn't look back. She walked like she didn't even hear me. We ran after her. Connor called her name over and over, but it was like the sound didn't reach her. She kept walking, slow and steady, toward the figure at the bend. The trail twisted once, then dropped away into a sharp ledge. That was where we found her. Lena stood right at the edge of a rock shelf, her arms slightly raised like she was trying to balance. Her feet were too close to the lip. I saw how pale her knuckles were, clenched at her sides. Her hair moved gently, though the air around us was dead still. I reached her first. "Lena," I said, breath tight. Hey, it's me. Brighter." She turned, finally. Her eyes didn't focus. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. I took her hand, gently, trying not to startle her. Then something pulled her. Her body jerked forward. I caught her wrist, dropped to my knees in the dirt, heels sliding. Her full weight shifted into my grip. My fingers locked around her arm as she started to go over the edge. Connor grabbed my shoulder from behind, shouting, bracing himself, and together we held on. The ground beneath us cracked. We collapsed backward, Lena still in my grasp. All three of us hit the ground hard, choking on dust and leaves. I looked at her jacket. It was torn down the back, long slashes in the fabric, as if something had dragged its nails straight through it. I tried to sit up, but my legs shook too hard. Connor was already on his feet, pale and swearing. He looked at me like he didn't know what to say. I didn't either, because I had felt it. Another hand, holding Lena. Just for a second, cold fingers wrapped around her arm from below, just under mine. The grip was strong. The nails were sharp. They scraped against my skin through the cloth. Lena was breathing now, fast and shallow, still staring into the woods like something was waiting for her to turn back. I helped her to her feet. She didn't speak, didn't even blink. Her wrist had red marks where I had grabbed her. But there were others too, bruised rings that didn't come from me. We left everything behind. We ran, back down the trail, past the sign, past the silence. We didn't stop until the road opened up and the trees thinned out again. Lena did not remember what happened. Not the figure, not the ledge, not the feeling of being pulled. All she remembered was standing on the trail, and then us grabbing her. A week later, she still had a dark purple mark around her wrist, like a handprint, faint, but unmistakable. About a month after that, Connor messaged me. No greeting, just one line. "That sign is in my trunk." I never asked how it got there. I sold my car, deleted every photo from that trip, cleared my map history too. But sometimes, if I let my eyes rest too long on the screen, a search suggestion appears on the GPS. Hamlet H. No address, no route, just a name, waiting. That one hit a little different. If these stories mean something to you, leave a like, subscribe, or share this video with someone who'd stay up to hear it too. And if you've got a true horror story of your own, my email's in the description. Now, story 6. "Do not drive Chestnut Ridge after 5, the old man said. He stood behind the counter at the gas station, half hidden behind a rack of keychains and dusty sunglasses. People go missing up there. No joke. Especially after rain. They're not as no-peas." I smiled politely. "Thanks for the heads up." NYFM. It was already after 4, and the clouds had started to thicken, but I figured I had time. "My name's Rachel, 33. I was heading to Norton for a job interview the next morning and had mapped out my route to avoid the highway. GPS showed a Forest Service road that cut through Chestnut Ridge and came out just a few miles from my motel. It looked like it would save me 20 minutes. I took it. The turnoff came just past an old ranger station. Asphalt turned to gravel. The woods grew tighter. Rain came in light drizzles, soft enough to ignore at first. The air smelled like wet leaves and something older, like rock dust. The road narrowed until the trees scraped both sides. I passed a few deer, one standing motionless in the middle of the trail before it bounded off without a sound. I rolled the windows up and slowed down. The sun had dropped behind the ridge without me noticing. That was when I saw the tree. It had fallen across the trail, Not huge, but wide enough to block both tires. Moss along the trunk still dry on one side. Fresh fall. I stopped and reversed slowly, trying to find a spot to turn around. Then I felt the rear tires slip. I pressed the brake, got out to check. The back wheels had dropped into a shallow dip, soft with mud from the rain. Not deep, but enough to need traction. I knelt to look closer and saw them. Footprints. They circled the car, barely visible in the fading light, but fresh. The treads were heavy, deep at the heel, and wide. Not mine. Not from someone passing. They moved around the side, paused near the rear bumper, and disappeared into the brush. I stood slowly, listened. Nothing. Not a breeze. Not a bird. The woods were heavy with silence. I got back in, locked the doors, tried not to panic. Then I noticed the side mirror. It had been folded in. I had been out there for less than 3 minutes. No sound. No movement. But someone had been close enough to touch the mirror. I started the engine and turned the headlights on. They flickered. Once. Then steadied. I reached for my phone. 10% battery. No bars. The sky dropped fast into gray. The trail ahead was too narrow to turn around. I had to go forward or wait in place. Then, through the corner of the windshield, I saw movement. A figure. Low to the ground. It moved just beyond the first row of trees. No footsteps. Just motion. I grabbed the flashlight from the glove box and clicked it on. That is when I saw the first set of footprints appear in the mud again. Fresh. Close. Circling back. I did not wait. I slammed the flashlight into my coat pocket, grabbed my keys, and ran. Straight ahead, away from the car. The trees closed in on both sides, branches whipping my arms as I pushed through. Rain picked up, colder now, seeping through my sleeves. The trail was uneven and slick with wet leaves. My boots slipped once, then again, and the third time I fell hard. My knee hit stone. I bit my lip to keep from crying out and reached for my phone. The screen was cracked. It blinked once, then died. I crawled to the side, dragging my leg, found a cluster of roots near a rock shelf and forced myself into the space beneath it, just wide enough to squeeze in sideways. I pulled my coat over the flashlight, letting only a sliver of light spill through. The forest above was black. Then I heard him. Steps, careful and slow, crushing leaves with every shift. Then a pause. Then breath. It was close, maybe just a few feet away. Harsh, wet, like someone who had run too far, now trying to breathe without being heard. He circled the rock once. I held still. My fingers ached from gripping the edges. He stepped closer. A crack of twig just above me. I looked up and saw the silhouette against the clouds. He stood on the ledge, turning slightly, searching. His boots scraped the edge. Then, silence. He stood there for what felt like minutes, then finally moved on. His steps faded into the woods. I waited, and waited. 30 minutes, maybe more. Then I crawled out. The forest felt hollow, but I moved carefully, following the sound of water until I found the edge of a stream. I limped along it, keeping the light low. After what felt like forever, I saw the beam of a headlamp bobbing in the distance. 2 figures. Rangers. I stumbled toward them, and the first one raised a hand fast. "You okay? You are not supposed to be out here. There is no prisoner. There is no prisoner." I could not even answer. They took me back down a side path to where the service road picked up. My car was gone. I told them what I saw. They exchanged a glance. "No hunting permits issued this week," one of them said. "And that trail, it has been closed since last fall. It's again tane." Before we left, I asked to check something. My bag had been found near the stream. When I opened it, The zipper was already pulled back, and on top of my spare shirt was a single muddy handprint, fingers spread wide, pressed into the fabric like someone had leaned on it. Since that night, I have never driven unfamiliar roads after sunset. I traded in the car. I keep a spare mirror in the glove box now, because sometimes I still find the side one folded in, even when I know I never touched it. And the worst part, I still remember the sound of his breath, right above my head. The radio had been breaking up all night. Static swelled between every hill, cutting in and out like breath through a cracked door. I was running a solo delivery across the West Virginia border, somewhere near the ridgeline where the fog comes in low and thick, the kind that moves like it is alive. Born in '89, been driving long enough to know the signs of a bad stretch. This one felt off even before the GPS gave out. All I had left was the AM band and a full tank, and both were starting to feel unreliable. The road climbed slow. Fog pressed against the windshield like wet cotton. No moon, no lights, just the faint hum of the engine and the garbled voice of a weather station that kept cutting out halfway through its alerts. Then it changed. Around 2 a.m., the radio popped once and cleared. No static, no feedback, just a voice. Mine, saying, "Turn back. You've already been here." That no R, it repeated. Flat. Same tone. Same pauses. "Turn back. You've already been here." And that's a project. I stared at the dial, hand frozen on the wheel. My mouth was still open. I hadn't spoken. The sound wasn't live. It was a playback. But I recognized the breath between the words. I knew the way my voice tightened at the end of a sentence when I was tired. It was me. I turned it off, drove in silence for a full mile, tried to convince myself it was a technical glitch, maybe a feedback loop from an old CB line. But I hadn't used the mic. Not once that night. I stopped partway up the slope to check the tires. The incline was slick, and I had felt a drag in the rear. I stepped out, flashlight in hand, boots sinking a little into the soft gravel. The air was cold and full of mist. I spotted headlights ahead. Dim. Still. Parked on the incline just around the curve. I called out, just in case. Nothing moved. I started walking toward the light. Then they vanished. Not flickered. Not drove off. Just gone. 1 second there. Next second, nothing but white fog and wet silence. As I stood there, the radio inside the cab clicked back on by itself. And deep in the static, I thought I heard something. A laugh. Soft. Close to the mic. I climbed back into the truck, breathing hard. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the keys. The radio was still alive, low and hissing, the sound of static rolling like distant wind. I turned the volume all the way down, but the noise stayed. That was enough for me. I put it in gear and started driving again. The fog thickened until I could barely see 5 feet ahead. The road dipped and turned through a narrow curve, and my headlights smeared across the mist like paint on glass. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other hovering near the door handle. The GPS was gone. No bars. No map. Just the blank blue screen. I told myself it was only 10 more miles to the highway, but the dashboard clock had been stuck at 2:40 for a long time. Then I saw the shape. At first it looked like another signpost buried in the fog, but as I got closer, it straightened. Shoulders, arms, a long coat hanging still in the mist. A person. I slowed down and hit the horn once. No reaction. The figure stood dead center in the lane, facing me. My headlights flickered once, and in that instant the person seemed closer. I blinked hard, gripped the wheel, and leaned forward. When the lights came back on, the road was empty. No one there. But the glass in front of me carried the faint shape of a face. Just the outline. Moisture gathered into the shape of a mouth. Then eyes. Press from the inside. I jerked back. The breath fogged up instantly. My chest seized. I threw the truck into gear and hit the gas. The tires spun once before catching, mud spraying up from both sides. The fog behind me glowed faintly like there were headlights buried in it. But I did not look back. I could not. I drove until the fog thinned, until the blacktop widened into a stretch of open road. The first sign I saw said Knoxville, 40 miles. I did not slow down once. By the time I hit the interstate, it was almost dawn. I pulled into a rest stop, cut the engine, and sat there with my forehead against the wheel. The radio was still on, though I had never touched the switch again. It hummed softly, just static. Then a click, and my own voice said, "You made it." Ready, wise. 3 weeks later, I replaced every wire in the truck. Had the radio pulled and scrapped. The mechanic swore it was dead. But on foggy nights, when I drive past ridges like that one, I swear I still hear it. The low hum, the faint laugh buried inside. And sometimes, when the glass fogs up on the inside, a handprint appears before I can breathe. 7 stories down, and just one more to go. Thanks for staying with me this far. Really, the last one. It stays with me. Let's begin. We were just supposed to rest for an hour or two. That was it. Pull over. Stretch out. Get back on the road before sunrise. I never meant for us to actually fall asleep. My name's Alyssa. I was 26 at the time. My best friend Jenna, in same age. We had been riding shotgun since we left Lexington. We were headed to Asheville for a friend's birthday, driving overnight to beat traffic and catch some scenery with the fall leaves. By the time we hit the foothills, the wind had picked up and the temperature dropped harder than expected. October, cold felt like winter that year. Jenna found a rest stop on the map, just outside the state forest line, supposedly open, but barely maintained. We pulled in around 10:30. The place was half lit. 2 busted vending machines and a line of bathroom stalls that looked abandoned. The lot was mostly empty. Just one other car, farther down, and no lights inside. I parked near the far end, close to the tree line. Our windows started fogging as soon as I cut the engine. Jenna stayed in the car with her chips and earbuds. I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth and wash my face. The mirror was cracked. The air smelled like wet concrete and something older. That was when I saw the note. Folded once, tucked neatly between the faucet and the soap dispenser. Not wet, not crumpled. Just sitting there like it had been left on purpose. I picked it up and unfolded it. Handwritten in shaky print. "If you're reading this, leave before midnight, and we will not this cade." I stood still for a full minute, just staring at it. Then I folded it back the same way and slid it into my pocket. I told myself it was just a prank, some bored kid messing around. I went back to the car, climbed in, and told Jenna someone left a creepy note in the bathroom. She didn't even take her headphones off, just said, "Cool," and kept eating. We locked the doors and tried to sleep. I curled up under the emergency blanket. She was still scrolling her phone, legs stretched toward the heater vents. By the time it was close to 1, I had only dozed off once or twice. The headlights cut out first. Not flickered, just died. Like someone flipped a switch. Then the wind came back. Stronger. The whole car shuddered once. Jenna whispered, "Did you hear that?" Dowley's wall for clean day. I sat up. "What?" "You want a second?" Footsteps. Behind the car. Abe nodded. We both stopped breathing. Outside, everything was dark. Then something tapped the window. 3 times. Left side. My side. I turned slowly. There was nothing there. But the glass was fogging up. From the inside. I reached for the ignition and twisted hard. The engine coughed once. Then nothing. The dashboard lights stayed dark. Jenna pulled her earbuds out. "Why is the dome light off?" she asked. I tried the switch. Nothing happened. No clicks. No flicker. Just cold air pressing through the seams of the door. Then she reached for the handle. "I am just going to check it out." I grabbed the sleeve of her hoodie. "No. Wait." In size, she rolled her eyes. But I did not let go. I looked past her through the fogged window, trying to see the back of the car. That was when something moved. Fast. From the rear corner of the vehicle, a blur. Then a shape leaned into the window just behind Jenna's seat. Before either of us could scream, her door flung open. A hand grabbed her by the back of the hood and yanked. She was gone. Just like that. Her legs disappeared into the dark. I threw myself out of the car and hit the ground hard. Mud soaked through my jeans. My flashlight was still in the side pocket of the door. I snatched it up, flicked it on, and aimed it toward the trees. There she was, 3 meters out, face down, one arm reaching back, twitching. I ran. I grabbed her wrist, braced my feet, and pulled. Hard. Something resisted. Her body jerked forward an inch. I pulled again, shouting her name, and she came free all at once, like something had just let go. We scrambled back into the car, slammed the doors, locked everything. Both of us were shaking. Jenna was crying, whispering. It had fingers. I felt them. It was pulling me. I rated on tails, with BS. I reached for the wipers without thinking. There was something stuck on the blade. A strip of red cloth, tied in a perfect knot. I turned the engine. It started on the first try. We drove without speaking, past the tree line, past the empty car that was still parked near the entrance, past the busted vending machines and the cracked pavement. And just as the rest stop disappeared in the rearview mirror, the wind stopped. Completely. Not a branch stirred. We did not stop again until morning. Jenna never stays out past dark anymore. Not even for errands. If she sees red cloth, she walks the other way. I sleep with the car windows open now. I cannot bear the feeling of warm breath inside an airtight space. The paper note. I have thrown it away twice, but it keeps finding its way back into my wallet. Still folded, still dry, still waiting. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I truly mean that. If you enjoyed these stories, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. That way, you won't miss the next ones. And once again, thank you for walking this dark road with me tonight.